Guys, we're going to talk about absolute value equations today, and we're going to start off real simple like we did back in the old days here. What's the absolute value of -3? And I'm hoping everybody says 3. Now, what's the absolute value of -3? And I'm hoping everybody says 3. Now the question is, why did we get these answers? Why are both of these the same? And I'm hoping it's because you remember what the definition of an absolute value is. The definition of absolute value is a number's distance, and that's the important word, from 0. Because distance is always a positive amount, it's how much you've traveled, that's why the absolute value of a number is always positive. The number 3 is 3 steps away from 0. 1, 2, 3. -3 is also 3 steps from 0. So because both represent distance from 0, and distance is a positive answer, both of these answers were positive. So essentially, all absolute value questions potentially have 2 different answers, or can have up to 2 answers. So let's now go to some equations. The absolute value of x plus 10 equals 12. The absolute value of 12 equals 12, or the absolute value of -12 could equal 12. Because there are 2 potential answers, we have to do 2 separate equations. We're going to do x plus 10 equals 12. X plus 10 could equal -12. So every absolute value equation actually breaks apart into 2 different problems. So subtract a 10. X equals 2. Subtract 10 here. X equals -22. These are not yet the answer. Just like with a lot of other equations we did this year, we have to check. So plug 2 back into this. 2 plus 10 equals 12. That works. So I'm going to circle it. Now let's try -22. -22 plus 10, so let's check this so you guys can see what I'm doing. -22 plus 10 will equal the absolute value of -12, which is 12. That worked, so I'm going to circle the -22. Let's try this again. The absolute value of 3x plus 5 equals 8. So we have to create 2 different problems. 3x plus 5 equals 8. 3x plus 5 equals -8. Other things to notice. I never, and I mean never ever, change what's inside the absolute value. It's this number that's changing. Subtract 5. 3x equals 3. X equals 1. Subtract 5 here. 3x equals -13. And leave it as a fraction. Fractions are better. -13 over 3. Now these are our potential answers. We could do a check, right? 1 times 3 is 3. And that's going to give us 8. So that works. Circle him. Now check him. You don't have to show the check. You just have to do it. 3 times -13 over 3 plus 5. Well, the 3's will cancel. So I get -13 plus 5. That makes oops, guess what that's going to be? Boom. Circle it. Now what if I amp up the equation a little bit? Ooh, I got bright. Here we go. A little more elaborate equation. Same exact work. I'll do it in a different color. Going to set up your 2 equations. 2x plus 5 equals x plus 4. Then we're going to do 2x plus 5 equals, now you got to change all of this. Negative x minus 4. Notice, I did not change what's in here. That stays the same. He changes. You keep it in its original format, and then you change everything. And now you just solve the question. Subtract the 5 over. X equals negative 1. Going to add the x over. Subtract the 5. Divide by 3. Now, these are my two potential answers. I need to check. So I'll do it over here. Check. All right. First one I'm going to check is negative 1. So I'm going to do 2 times negative 1 plus 5. Will that equal negative 1 plus 4? So that makes negative 2 plus 5. Will that equal 3? Oops. Will positive 3 equal positive 3? Yes, it does. I'm going to circle it. Now let's check this dude. We've got 2 times negative 3 plus 5. Will that equal negative 3 plus 4? Negative 6 plus 5. Will that equal 1? Yes, it does. So I'm going to circle it. Now, all of these worked, but sometimes you do have to reject one. Let's try some more. Now, this one looks a little different from all the rest. The difference here is we have this plus 5 next to the absolute value. You cannot solve it in this format. In order to solve this, the absolute value must be alone. So the first thing you must do before you do anything else is move the 5 over to the other side. That's 100% essential. Once this is isolated, and only then do we do our two separate equations. So I'm going to do x plus 3 equals 2x minus 5. X plus 3 equals negative 2x plus 5. Notice, I did not change this guy. Only this stuff changes. Now we solve. Let's add over the 2x. Okay, so these are my potential answers. Now I'm going to do a little checking. So let's do a check. And when you check, you go all the way back to the original equation. So I'm going to plug in 8. 8 plus 3 plus 5. Will that equal 2 times 8? Okay, so let's see what happens. This here becomes 11 plus 5. Will that equal 16? Yep. Going to circle the 8. Now let's try 2/3. 2/3 plus 3 plus 5. Will that equal 2 times 2/3? All right. Well, if you want, we can use our calculator to do this. So we're going to do 2/3 plus 5. Then I'm going to do math, enter, enter. That's 17 over 3. Oops, it's supposed to be that guy. Let's fix it. 2/3 plus 3. Math, enter, enter. That's 11 over 3 plus 5. Will that equal 2 times 2/3? Math, enter, enter. So we'll 11 over 3 plus 5. Math, enter, enter. Will 26 over 3 equal 4 over 3? Nope. So we're going to reject the 2/3. So the only answer this time is 8. So you got to make sure you check. All right, one more, and then we're going to do a little graphing. Just like last time, absolute value must be isolated first. So I'm going to subtract the x over. I get the absolute value of x equals 4 minus 4x. We do our two separate equations. X equals 4 minus 4x. X equals negative 4 plus 4x. So I'm going to add 4x over. 5x equals 4. X equals 4/5. This one I'm going to subtract 4x over. Negative 3x equals negative 4. Let's divide by negative 3. X equals positive 4/3. All right, let's do our check. I'm going to draw a line here to separate. So we're going to plug in 4/5 into the original equation. So it's 4/5 plus 4/5. Will that equal 4 minus 3 times 4/5? All right, so don't freak out. Let's put that in our calculator. The absolute value of 4/5, let me clear this out. Oops. 4/5 plus 4/5, math, enter, enter, is 8/5, which a lot of you probably could have done without your calculator. Then we'll do 4 minus 3. Look, I'm typing in exactly what I see. Math, enter, enter. Look, 8/5. That worked. So I'm going to circle 4/5. Now let's do 4/3. The absolute value of 4/3. Right? So we're going back to the original. Plus 4/3 equal 4 minus 3 times 4/3. Well, this is going to be 8/3. And if you didn't know that, put it in your calculator. Do 4 minus 3 4/3. And that's 0. That doesn't work. So we're going to reject 4/3. So there's only one answer for that as well. So always check is the moral of the story. Sometimes both of them reject and you would write no solution. All right, now what I want to do next is show you how to graph these guys. We're going to do it both by hand and with the graphing calculator. Real simple, absolute value. Everyone should know that the absolute value graph looks like a V. So our pictures should look like a V, very sharp, pointy V. Easiest way to do it, I always go here. What makes inside the absolute value 0? That would be 0. So I make an XY chart. I put 0 in the middle, and I do a couple negatives, and I do a couple positives. And then the absolute values would be 0. Absolute value of 1 is 1, 2, 3. Absolute value of negative 1 is 1. Absolute value of negative 2 is 2. Absolute value of negative 3 is 3. And then we graph it. X, Y. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can go, do whatever you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 5. And we'll graph it. Negative 3, 3. Negative 2, 2. Negative 1, 1. 0, 0. And because we made our own XY chart, this would have arrows on it. Notice it makes the V shape. So that's your absolute value graph. Now let me show you how to do it in the graphing calculator. Let's clear that out. You're going to go to Y equals, and clear out whatever's in there. Now the way you graph absolute value is you hit the math button, scroll over to number, and it's the very first choice. Notice it's an absolute value symbol. Throw in a letter X, and you're going to hit zoom 6 for zoom standard. And that gives us a really nice picture. There we go. All right, so the blue guy is the original equation right there. Now let's do one more absolute value graph, a little trickier. This guy. We're going to graph this one. Now, first deal when you want to graph something, you do need to get y isolated. So let's get that y alone. I'm going to subtract over the 3. And I end up with y equals absolute value of x plus 2 plus 1. All right, now, I want to graph this guy. You could do it once again with an XY chart. What I do is I always go back to the absolute value. What would make him 0? Negative 2 would. So that's what I'm putting in the middle of my graph. And then I'm going to do a couple numbers before -2 and a couple numbers after. -1, 0, 1. You can keep going if you want. Then I'm going to plug in. -5 plus 2 is -3. The absolute value of -3 is 3, so this is 4. Plug in -4. Right? That's going to make 3. Plug in -3. That makes -3 plus 2 is -1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Plug him in, 0, so it's 1. Now plug -1 in. -1 plus 2 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. And this will be 3. And this will be 4. Let's graph it. So this time, these are the kind of numbers I need. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's take a peek at what we got now. So -5, we're up at 4. -4, I'm up at 3. -3, I'm up at 2. -2, I'm up at 1. Oh, that's not 1, that's 1. -1, I'm up at 2. 0, I'm up at 3. 1, I'm up at 4. And there's our V. Now, let's talk about, that's 100% perfect way to do it. That's one way of doing it. Actually, I'll show you in the graphing calculator. So y equals, what I'm going to do is leave the original guy on there in blue, and underneath it I'm going to graph this guy. So I'm going to hit Math, scroll over to Number, absolute value is x plus 2. I'm going to push my arrow over, and then I had a +1. I'm going to hit Graph, or Zoom Standard. And notice we have the picture in red, just like I got here. Now, let's talk about how you could have come up with this graph without doing an XY chart. What this is, it's a transformation of functions. Look at the original equation. It was y equals x. Let's take a look at this new equation right here. A little review of transformations. Notice the +2 is inside with the x. And if it affects the x, we always do the opposite. So according to this equation, the v that we got up here should be moving 2 units to the left, boom, boom, and up 1. And if you notice, that corresponds with our transformation rules. So that's another way you could have graphed it as well. So that's absolute value equations. I hope you enjoyed tonight's homework.